Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to be discussing purposeful movement versus technology, especially when it comes to your 0 to 6 year old. My name is Nkemsi Nachiago, and I'm the founder of the Montessori Home Education Academy, where we run the Montessori Home Education program for parents of 0 to 6 year olds. So, today, purposeful movement is a concept that has come up. I realized I wanted to talk a little bit more about it and at the same time compare how it might be different from the activities that children might perform when they're on screens, on tablets or devices, especially your 0 to 6 year old who needs more engagement in reality. So purposeful movement is a common concept in the Montessori method, and it really has to do with purposeful movement. So movement, when we are doing any form of learning, any movement is always helpful. So whether you're teaching a child language, letters, mathematics, anything at all, it's always important that they're able to move and not just sit still in one place. In fact, sitting still in one place is one of the least effective ways of teaching, where they have to just do like passive listening, or maybe if you're looking at a screen and then you have so many things flashing at the same time, or so many options on the screen, or you're watching maybe a video. Let's say a child is watching a video where the teacher is trying to explain something. There's a lot of animations by the side, all in the name of, let's say, teaching letters. It is not as effective as when a child is focused on a particular activity and able to move. Now, movement is one thing. Of course, all forms of movement are generally helpful with teaching, with learning. But when you now have purposeful movement, it means that the movement is directly connected with the activity that the child is doing. So I'm going to use an example of learning letters or learning how to write. So we have the Montessori sandpaper letters. This is an example for letter C, which is pronounced K. Now, purposeful movement would mean when the child is learning this letter, they equally trace. This is a sandpaper letter. I don't know if you can hear the sound. So there's a rough sound produced. So the movement of using the fingers to trace this letter is purposeful movement because it is tied directly with the direction and the motion you need to make to write the letter. The child is hearing the sound, seeing the movement, actively engaging their senses. Um, Compared to a screen, for instance, where maybe the child will have to tap the screen or make similar movements for it, regardless of whatever kind of letters they are doing. Now, as long as the lesson being learned is directly correlated or directly connected to the movement being made, it is called purposeful movement. I'm going to share some more examples, of course, but generally, sitting still and just listening to a teacher talking on and on and on, or just looking at a screen or listening to a video, especially for a 0 to 6 year old, but even for older people as well, is generally an ineffective way of learning. So I'm going to share generally some benefits um, of this purposeful movement and how it applies to learning. One of the key ways you can, even before we go into that, one of the key ways you can test if a child has been able to learn something is if you ask them to narrate what they just did after a learning session. Let's say we were learning about letters or letter sounds, and they worked with three letters. Maybe they did letter C, they did letter S, and they did letter R. And by the time we're done, I can just ask casually, "Oh, do you remember what letters you did today, or what did you practice?" Sometimes they might remember the letter sound, or they might remember the movement they made with their hand, or they remember what they saw. There is definitely something that they will remember. However, if it's a video that they were watching or they were listening to or something on the screen, they might remember the song that came with it, or they might not even remember at all. It might just be like, oh, they just had fun, right? But you might count it that by the time they watch that same video multiple times, you will now say, oh, they've learned the letters on the screen, they've learned the shapes on the screen. What we may not take into consideration now is the impact of course, a lot of research keeps coming up, and we see I'm yet to see that research that would show, oh, there's a very positive impact of putting children in front of the screen, especially early childhood. No matter what it is we think they are learning and how we think they are learning it. So being able to ask them when they finish, let's say, an educational app or an educational program, and compare it with similar time spent on a physical activity will give you an idea of the advantage or benefit of purposeful movement physical activities versus using technology to teach your child who is especially below 6 years old. So some of the examples we have of purposeful movement is one, having increased focus and concentration versus when you're using a device where there's the ability to switch between multiple activities. You can just swipe and you've moved to another activity. You can swipe again, you're back and forth. Even on the screen, you hardly just see one item, no matter how educational the app is. Between the colors, the lights, it's hard to just focus on one thing. However, if you are doing a physical activity where you're going to be moving, you can take breaks, you can jump around, you're more likely to focus and concentrate. So I'm going to share another example. So this is the part of the Montessori golden beads. This is a 1000 cube that is used to teach the number 1000 or the thousands. We also have the hundreds. This is 100 beads basically. Now comparing this with working on a screen, just the concentration, the fact that the child is able to look at that, look at the beads, touch them, the multisensorial stimulation, the multisensorial in the sense that they are looking at it, they are seeing it, they are touching it, they are feeling it. They are also able to feel the weight. Now the weight is one dimension that is hard to perceive via a device. Now this is 1000, this is 100. So this is basically 10 of this, right? And by holding it, you can feel that one is heavier. So you're not only cramming the concept that, oh, this is 100, 100 has two zeros. Nobody's even talking about the zeros now because the quantity is more important than the number of zeros. Zeros and all those details comes much later. If a child understands that 1000 is bigger, physically it is heavier, it is a lot of things, a child who does this is much more able to internalize and actually learn what needs to be learned compared to a child who is cramming numbers on the screen and learning it through a song just for the purpose of memorization and saying my child can say from 1 to 1000. But what do they really know about those numbers? So focus and concentration is very much achieved with physical items with purposeful movement. Another thing is that a purposeful movement helps the child to go at a normal pace. So if, for instance, you're trying to arrange a set of blocks, um, so I have some building blocks here, just three pieces. If a child is working with this, if they have up to 10 of it, and you're saying, oh, let's stack these blocks, they'll go one by one by one. They're moving at a normal pace because they have to grip it, they have to arrange one after the other. Now, if you're doing this on a device, you're just going to be moving like this: swipe, tap, move, drag, drop. They are not learning the real learning. Sometimes when we talk about learning on a device or learning on a screen, we're just focusing more on, let's say, the result or the exam kind of thing where, oh, the person should be able to reproduce this answer. If that's the kind of learning you're looking for your 0 to 6 year old, you're actually not looking for the right thing because imagine some of the things that we learned maybe in the university or secondary school or whatever stage it was where we had learned it just for the purpose of passing an exam. You will find that you can hardly remember some of those things. But the ones that we learned, you know, through play, even when we learned them a long time ago, maybe in primary school, like grade level, or even some nursery activities, some things that we actually learned through play and we were interested in, you'll find that those things stick better. So if your purpose, I think we had a video the other time about preparing your child for life and not for exams. If your purpose is for exams, you may be able to get a couple of things from the screen, but the damage that comes with it, the impact, the addiction, and all the other struggles that are posed by a screen are definitely not what even that exam learning you're trying to teach your children. But if you want them to truly learn, to truly understand, being able to hold blocks like this, to stack them, to feel the weight, even though this is plastic, to look at the colors, to see how they are fitting inside each other is nothing compared to, no matter how three-dimensional it wants to look on a device, it's nothing compared to that. And to see how they're able to stand, of course, they can simulate certain things. Oh, if you put too many blocks, maybe it will fall, or if you don't put the block on top of the other. But it's not compared to when you can hold it. So that act of that movement you're making with your fingers, your brain is also recording it, documenting it for the children. Um, it's helping them to really understand, okay, this is fitting inside here because this goes like this. These are some things they cannot easily see or perceive with a device compared to real life activities. So sometimes I think why we might even default to devices is because we are worried that, oh, the children are just playing, they're not learning anything. You might see them playing with these blocks and you feel like, oh my goodness, they're just wasting their time. Their mates are already coding and doing all sorts of things, and you want to put them on that device so that they can start coding also. Um, Meanwhile, they haven't learned the basics. One of the reasons why devices might work a little better in terms of educating adults to an extent, not for the full education is because adults already have some background knowledge, some background information, which children, on the other hand, between the age of 0 to 6 are meant to build those background knowledge and that background information. But if we skip over it and we rush to start getting them to cram facts, memorize information, then they're going to be missing out on a very valuable opportunity, which means they will have a very shaky and faulty educational foundation. So, purposeful movement ensures that they move at a normal pace. They're not just swiping, moving things fast, and they're not getting it's not an addictive or an exciting process in a way that they are not even focusing on the learning but the entertainment and the well I say the reward that comes from the noises you click it says yeah when you're working with blocks on your own happily you're the one motivating yourself by yourself. We know that intrinsic motivation is something that is even commonly lacking nowadays because people if there's no one to cheer for you, there's no one to clap for you, you don't feel like doing something, right? This is not what children need at that age. So another thing that is an advantage of having physical activities where there is purposeful movement is being able to improve memory and retention. There's been a lot of research, showing that if you're teaching anything, as long as you're able to introduce some form of movement in it, it just skyrockets the way the child learns it, the way the child understands it, and the way they remember. Remember, being able to recall things naturally rather than recalling them because you just read it maybe the night before an exam or because you said it 100 times to yourself is completely different. It's the difference between being able to create things from what you know versus being able to just pour out answers, pass exams, and move to the next stage. By the time you're done, you're wondering, what next? What can you do? Who are you? And what can you be, right? This is not what we want for our children. So movement helps with their memory, it helps with their retention, and the movement when we use physical objects, like this is another material, is a sensorial material called the knobless cylinders. So if I'm holding physical items like this and I'm moving them around, with my hands, I'm feeling them. These two things, for instance, are the same height, but because the thickness is different, the diameter is different, I can also see that this is heavier than the other. You cannot perceive this if you're using a device. Now, children, you don't even need to have this specific material. Children play with these things all around the house. But if we don't understand that while they are playing with these things, they are learning, they are perceiving, they are feeling, we might feel like, oh, this is not sophisticated enough, right? But if they are doing, let's say you say, oh, the child learned about cylinders on the screen or on the device, they are moving this. What next? If they want to stack this small one on the big one, let's say put a series of cylinders on top of the other. If you're doing this on the screen, the movement you need to make is basically like this, like this, like this. No matter what you're moving, whether you're moving cylinders, whether you're moving blocks, your hand is moving the same way. So your brain is not making use of that movement to store any information. Unlike if you're physically holding the item, now the purposeful movement would mean I'm holding these blocks that are made of plastic, they're lighter. The shape is rectangular. I can hold it with two fingers. If I'm holding the cylinders, I might use two here. If I need to hold more than two, I'm using four fingers this time around, right? On a screen, you can just keep using one finger all around. Um, Now, the fine motor skills we complain that children are struggling to have, they're not able to build. These are things that are built within the age of 0 to 6 very easily when they play with physical items. But now, if they're using the screen, if they're left-handed, they're just using their left finger, like single finger, to move things around. If they're right-handed, using one finger, sometimes it's two, and that is it. They are doing the same action for whatever it is, whether they are moving blocks on the screen, they are moving letters. So I hope we're beginning to get the whole idea of not only purposeful movement tied to the activity, but the importance of using physical items which children use on a daily basis, even without much effort. Of course, as long as we're able to provide them with that free opportunity to play with things that are safe and within their reach. Now, another example, or another benefit of purposeful movement I wanted to share with us is the fact that, especially for your 0 to 3 year old, it is very important that they learn things from concrete to abstract. So from 3 to 6, they begin to, like if you're following a typical Montessori curriculum, they can start gradually moving to some things that are a little bit abstract, but not even so much. From 0 to 3, it's very concrete as much as possible. 3 to 4, still concrete. Then from 4, 5, 6, they start having a mix of concrete and abstract. So an example is this. if you're providing a book, a storybook for your child that is 0 to 3 year old, you want to make sure you provide things that, as much as possible, have real life pictures, which means even if before you can get books, your own family photos are a very good storytelling opportunity. Books that have real or realistic pictures, they will be more attracted to you because they are seeing reality. They are trying to understand what is real. So this is not the time, 0 to 3 is not the time to start showing them cartoons where they have animals that are talking, and then pigs are looking very pink, and then when they see them in real life, the pigs are almost brown, or where where every cow has black and white spots. So as much as possible, when things are being taught or exposed to the 0 to 3 year old, it's realistic, it's concrete, as long as you can make it that way, which means there is no benefit if your child cannot see access a zoo where they can see a lion, then let them be in the neighborhood and see a dog. It's more beneficial that they can see a physical dog than putting them on a screen to see a lion at the zoo and you're saying you're teaching them. No, the thousands of things they are able and need to actually learn in those first 3 years of their life. You don't have to see the whole world. No, even that their world, that their environment. A lot of times, children haven't even seen half of it, and we are so focused on. We want them to be so advanced. We want them to see the continent that they haven't been to because we feel they are missing out on things. And then the one that is in front of them, the insects, the grasshoppers, the flies, they don't even know what a housefly is, but you want them to know how. Let me see which fancy insect, maybe that is somewhere not in your environment. You want them to know how that one works. So start with your environment because wherever you are, you can probably experience, even for your 3 to 6 year old, you can probably experience the 5 classes of animals. You can see mammals, even if you don't see all types of mammals. But in their environment, I'm sure you can find a mammal to show them. You can find an invertebrate, an insect to show them. You can find fishes to show them. You can find the ones in your environment. Start with those ones because when you now get to the point where, oh, you need some kind of extra visualization. Maybe you can't visit a zoo for some reason, and then you want to just show them a short clip of a video when they're a little bit older. They can say, oh, this is like this thing that I saw. This is like this other thing that I know. It is more tangible and more beneficial for them compared to the impact of sitting them in front of a screen or in front of a device trying to teach them, something that is so much more away from them and leaving everything that is in your house, everything in your backyard, in your front yard, in your neighborhood, to teach them. So I mean, part of what we do in the Montessori home education program is really letting parents know the power that they have, the advantage that they have, how they are the most important teacher, being the prepared adult, having the basic knowledge that every subject can be found in nature, right? The level you want to go to depends on how much knowledge that you have. The more knowledge that you have as a parent, as a prepared adult, the more you can prepare your environment, whether it's your immediate environment or the one outside, nature, outdoors, and the more you can teach them. There are so many things. In fact, you can teach science, you can teach language, you can teach arts and crafts without even going more than a few kilometers around your house, depending on where you are, right? But of course, it's good to explore, it's good to expose them to as much as possible, um, like within your abilities. But ultimately, some of the reasons or excuses we give for relying on devices, technology, and screens is the feeling that we need to do more than we are doing because we don't realize that what we are doing or what we can do is already a lot with what we have. So that's just another example of how important it is for children to start with the concrete before they move to abstract. Again, purposeful movement, being able to touch things, being able to see things, the little animals in their environment that they can touch safely. It is much better than the one they are seeing on the screen that is just looking like, something that is just strange and moving around. Another good thing or benefit of purposeful movement where they have movement tied to the activity or physical items is that the multisensorial engagement. Sometimes, let's say they are cooking, for instance. Of course, we have cooking games, where they'll say, "Oh, bake a cake on the screen," and then you're moving the pink cupcake. You're doing this, you're doing that. They can't even smell anything. They can't smell anything. Um, in fact, sometimes a child playing that game has never even seen cupcakes being made. Even if you're making, no matter how the cupcake turns out, if you even just attempt to make it in your kitchen, it's much better off for the child. The experience they're going to get by touching it, by moving it, mixing the flour with their fingers, with their hands, being able to perceive, okay, maybe flour doesn't really have any specific smell, or the sugar tastes like this, or the salt tastes like that. the experience, the knowledge, the documentation that is going on in the brain is 1,000 times more than anything they can see or with a device or with a screen, swiping and arranging cupcakes. I remember that game from I don't even know how many years ago, but um, I was definitely not 6 years old. I was not even 12. I don't even know what age I was then playing that cupcake game. But these are things that now we are giving our 0 to 6 year olds who have not even really smelled a cupcake or seen what a cupcake, how it even, the process of making it. And then the next thing they are playing games about it, and we say they learned how to bake on the screen. So the distraction that comes from even some educational videos, someone has a video and they say they are teaching children maybe how to mix colors. And there's red, yellow, maybe red, yellow to be mixed to form green or orange. Red, yellow mixed to form orange. And instead of just giving children two crayons that they can just color on top of each other or poster colors that they can mix and see, we now have, a video that is showing them how to mix colors. They are mixing red, yellow. Meanwhile, on the screen at the top, there's something flashing there. On the other hand, there's a couple of tubes. Everything is just all over the place, and then there's music. How can they concentrate? And tomorrow we find ourselves complaining, oh, the child cannot focus. They are moving from one activity to the other. I'm not saying it is always because of screens, but even when there wouldn't have been an issue normally, the fact that we just bombard them with so much information and so much stimulation from a device, they now get so used to everything happening so fast, having so many things in front of them. Of course, by now we must have started hearing or learning that multitasking is sort of a scam, where it's more important to do one thing at a time than to be doing many things or even having so many things on in front of you. So if deviating a little bit, if your child is trying to read a book, I remember then when maybe you're trying to do an assignment or you're trying to study, and then you have like 5 books piled up. You have maths, you have English, you have um, science, and then you start with the maths. Maybe, oh, it's not working. You switch to English. You switch. Even just that is enough distraction. So it's not. This one even goes beyond technology. Sometimes just knowing that children need to be taught how to focus. They need to learn how to work on one thing at a time, and this is more achievable with a physical activity. So I remember the other day my daughter was trying to write some numbers or letters, and she had about 3 books in front of her, and then she said, oh, she wanted me to show her how to do a certain thing. I said, okay. I just came, I saw the table. I first removed the other 2 books that we were not working with, like very far away, and then we now look. I opened up the one we were working with, and then I looked at it and said, okay, try this, use these physical items, right? So that is something we may not even be aware of. If a child is working on something, even when they are playing with a toy, sometimes they have 100 out at the same time. It is very distracting. Apart from the fact that you want to have maybe just 2 or 3, when they pick one item, especially for the younger ones, let's say, the toddlers, when you're still the one sort of in charge of them picking their activities, when they pick a particular thing to work on, you want to make sure that every other thing is out of the way. You can easily move it out. Now, this is more possible with a physical activity than it is with the screen, because the screen, um, the 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 creators, the developers have to make good use of the space, right? You need to be able to, if you want to leave the page you're working on, you have to be able to just quickly tap somewhere and tap somewhere. So that's why you already have those many options always looking at you at the time that you are working, and this is very much distracting for a child. So by the time they are now working with a physical activity or they're in the classroom and they just have to look at one person talking or look at one thing happening, it feels so boring. It feels so hard to even keep up, right? So now we are almost conditioning them, especially if you're putting them on devices a lot, thinking that it's helping. You're now conditioning them to those fast-paced, distracting things, right? So with physical activities that involve purposeful movement, you can easily help them to focus on one thing at a time. There is also less strain. Another benefit, of course, with physical items, if you get tired of working, let's say with the letters, you get tired of working with this of tracing or arranging blocks, you can just look somewhere else, right? Because you're not looking at something that is so tiny, that is so disproportionate, because the shape and the sizes you're working with are real life sizes, real life items, compared to screens, devices where you're dealing with the light emissions, the blue light or the blue rays. You're also dealing with the fact that things are generally smaller, unless you're using a very big screen, which of course still has more impact. We're still talking about the impact on the eyesight and all sorts of things. So there's less eye strain with physical items. And the good thing, again, back to concentration with things that involve purposeful movement, is the fact that being able to physically work with your hands, with your eyes, with like paying attention with a lot of your senses means you can work for longer hours and then take breaks naturally. If you're working on a device with a screen, most of the time, even when the child is tired, they won't admit it, right? Because it's like, oh, should I eat or should I finish up this show that is just flashing? Or should I finish up this game that is, I'm about to get to a high score? Again, that is talking about this external motivation where they are trying to play something for points. They are trying to read 5 letters so that they can get so and so points. And then when there are no points to be earned, then they are not interested in reading a book. And then we'll say, oh, they read longer when they are on the screen because, the motivation, all these rewards, rewards, rewards. One thing we learn in the Montessori approach is you want to focus more on encouragement versus praise, because all those praises that are just based on you want to praise so that the child will do more. And then when you're not there, they're not interested. And we're trying to build habits that will prepare them for life. Again, ultimately, education should serve as a help to life. This is one of the famous Montessori's, Dr. Montessori's approaches and quotes. Education is for the purpose of life, for the purpose of developing a child, that can be an adult that is helpful to themselves and not for exams, not for praises. If you find that maybe you can't really do much if there's nobody to praise you, or there's no reward, or there's no clear acknowledgement somewhere, then you might already have been struggling with that issue of depending on only rewards, that external motivation, and that is something you do not want your child to grow up with or to start with, in this period of early childhood. Now, there's also the exercise benefits that come from purposeful movement. So, some of the examples I'm sharing, so these are just like small items, but imagine there are even some bigger items. Like if a child is working on mathematics, we have the mathematical number rods. I'm just going to share a smaller version. I don't know if you can see this. Okay, so where is this? No. So this now is the one rod, and then this is two, this is three. So this is an example where a child is learning about numbers and quantities and able to see that, okay, this is smaller than, and then this is bigger. This has two segments, three, and then they can see the height increasing. Now with the bigger version of this, the child can actually carry it and also feel the weight changing. There is nothing that beats that, right? If your child can recite from 1 to 100 and they don't really know what it means, um, or they can even write from 1 to 100 and it doesn't mean anything to them, it is not valuable. It's a waste of, it's sort of a waste of, let's say, the memory space and proper learning that should have taken place, because you want your children ultimately to build that love of learning. If your children don't love to learn, and if you don't build it from that 0 to 6 year old age range, it's not that it's impossible, but it's more difficult, right? You don't want them. 0 to 6 is when they are still mostly at home, even whether they are going to preschool, kindergarten, they still spend a lot of time at home, they still get to play, especially if you allow it and if you're aware of the benefits. So they still have that opportunity to enjoy learning without thinking of exams. But if you don't build that love of learning, if you make it look at something that must always be tied to a reward, then by the time they now start, proper school or they're doing exams, it's all about the A's, B's, and whatever it is. If they don't get a good grade, it's like, what am I even doing? There's no interest in actually learning for the purpose of learning or trying to build a skill or trying to create something. And that is something that is so valuable. You need to teach your child in this period of early childhood. So still sharing more examples. Um, Content that has any form of learning or education you're teaching your child, where they are able to use, where they're able to move, especially make movements that is tied to what they are learning, is generally more educational and more beneficial. Now, when you say educational, a lot of the times it's like, oh, it has to be language based or math based or science based. So math, literacy, and science. That's like, oh, once it's those three, that is educational. But the truth is that there are multiple um, aspects of a child development. I know we had a video where we talked about developing the whole child. You have the emotional aspect. Learning about patience, learning about concentration is something that you build with physical activities where you incorporate movement, right? If you're working on a device as a child, working on a screen, you're not building patience. What you're building In fact, you're learning not to set boundaries. It's more about as long as I'm enjoying this, or as long as this is making me happy or entertaining me, because ultimately it switches from educational to entertainment. That reward system, that fact that it's just so colorful and addictive, is making you happy. When you take it away, it's like, oh, that is some disaster waiting to happen. Now, funny enough, some people, I think I saw somewhere, someone was saying, oh, all this talk about devices. Of course, every child has a meltdown when you take away a device, but also children have a meltdown when you say it's time to leave the park. And I thought about it, I said, okay, yes, that might sound like a valid point, but if a child is playing on the playground, they are working on their development, they are working on their physical movement, their skills, their balance, working on how to even relate with other children, so many skills that they are building. But at the same time, the reason why I would say there's usually a meltdown when it's time to leave the park is because they haven't played enough. Some people will say, oh, the child can stay in the park for a whole day. But the truth is, they will be, even while they are playing, they will still run to come and take breaks to drink water, they will take breaks to have a snack. So if you plan a whole day at the park, they can probably stay a whole day at the park, but they will happily take breaks to eat, to drink, to pee, to do whatever they need to do. On the other hand, if that same or even half that time is being spent on a screen, to eat, to drink, to take a break, to do some of those things, they will be very less willing. So it's not about having a meltdown. If whatever a child is doing, in fact, it's very important to respect a child's work. We tell our children all the time, oh, this person is working, don't scatter their work. My daughter was building with magnetic tiles the other time, and her sister was trying to, push it down. So I said, oh, leave. She's working. You need to respect her work. When, oh, mommy is working on the laptop, daddy is working, whenever we are doing, everybody recognizes that work is not just about going to the office and coming back, but once you're focused on activity that is meaningful, that is work. So even when they're in quote playing, especially when I see someone trying to cross the other person's boundary, I say, oh, look, she's working, she's doing, respect her work, give her some space, walk around the mat, do this, do that. We call it work because it's not even a joke, right? So if a child is building blocks and you just say it's time to go somewhere, of course they'll have a meltdown. So it doesn't now compare it to the same. Someone will now say, oh, this is the same as, I thought it's only screens that cause meltdown. No, generally breaking anybody's concentration causes a meltdown. However, with um, with physical activities, if you give a warning, if you say, okay, maybe put two more blocks, or this is the time for this activity in the first place, right? By the time when you hear the first bell, or when you hear this song, it means we have just few more minutes to go. You have a timer. It's something that they can work with, and they know that once the timer is up, they are more willing to stop on their own. But you will notice, on the other hand, if it's a device, even with the timer, it's still like, oh, there's protest, there's complaint, because it is not just about what they are doing or what they are learning, but the fact that it is so engaging and it is made to be that way. The whole purpose of using multiple colors, multiple lights, and all sorts of attractions is to keep you there as long as possible. So we're still on the benefits of purposeful movement and how it helps, excuse me, how it helps with the child's learning and all that. But moving on to, will I say, the cons? So what are the downsides of all these activities, physical activities? Someone would say, oh, it's easy for you to say. Um, but really, when you realize the benefit and when you realize that children can be, will I say, trained or conditioned or nurtured to even prefer these physical activities, the major disadvantage that people might say is it requires a lot of time and engagement from the parent or from the adult. Now, that may be so in the beginning, but when you get used to it and when your child or your children also get used to it, then you don't even need to be so present. Our children can be working on their individual materials, toys, whatever it is, and we don't need to actively be there, doing it with them. Of course, you just be by the side supervising or just being aware if you have to separate any any arguments that come up and all that. But we don't have to actively say do this, do that because they've got used to it, right? So the same reason why you might feel, we can't survive without putting them on a device to just have some peace, it's because I would say maybe there hasn't been enough knowledge to really know that these things are possible and these are the things that children actually prefer, and it's also safer for them in the long run. A lot of times we might find ourselves saying, I've seen some debates on social media, and someone will say, oh, everything in for children, they might say, oh, children is moderation. My 2-year-old learns to speak on the screen. My this learns to do this on the screen. The device, it's all about balancing it and everything. I completely agree with balance, especially for adults. But for children, there is really no telling about the balance because sometimes even the impact might not show immediately from some of the things that we've seen from some of the research that we've gone through. It starts off initially like nothing. 0 to 3 is the period of the absorbent, 0 to 6 is the absorbent mind. Um, Now, 0 to 3, they are picking a lot of things. You're not even sure. The brain is developing, and 80 to 90 or 95% is developed in the first 3 years. Now, whatever impact happens in that period, you may now start seeing it in the second half, which is from 3 to 6. So you might not even be able to connect the impact from the screens and devices till much later on, right? So why would we, for example, take that risk if you know that there's a potential for it, but I'm yet to see the hazard or the risk associated with children's normal play, children playing with physical activities, playing with physical items. So of course, no matter what the arguments are, you would definitely like to err on the side of caution. I'm sure you want to build the love of learning in your children. I'm sure you want to help them with understanding things, with building their memory, and actually learning things the correct way, rather than just memorizing or preparing for exams that haven't even started. And even when those exams start, um, ultimately it should be a test of what they have learned and not just what they have been able to cram and pour. So the only disadvantage really of having activities that are physical and involve purposeful movement is requiring more engagement from the adult. But really, it just takes that initial step. And once you learn about it, those that are part of our program, I'm sure that over time they're already learning that on their own they can begin to start creating some activities for their children, or just set up the environment in a way that you don't have to always be telling them what to do next because you've already laid that foundation. You have those routines in place. Now, coming to technology, of course, it's not like it's all bad. I think my main concern a lot of times is for little children, your 0 to 6 year old. I'm not saying okay from 7 then they can now start sleeping on the TV, but I think there's a very key. It's very important to really understand that from 0 to 6 is so critical, and the things they need to be doing, the foundation they need to be building, is so tampered with and is so much obstructed and disrupted when we distract them with devices and screens that they don't need. Every other thing they want to learn, technology based, can really start much later on, right? They can get the basics, they can understand how things work, they can know that computers are so and so. Some of the time, they might even be able to use some of these devices without even knowing about simple machines. They don't even know that, oh, they are simple machines. This is how things work, but they're already swiping, scrolling, tapping, and we are excited that oh, they are tech gurus, right? So it doesn't work that way. But one of the pros I'll say of technology of devices is the convenience, the portability. But this convenience and portability again is more for adults than for children because what do you really need to be so portable for a child? If you want them to have something to do in the car, you can easily pick a small book. That is very portable as well. Um, they also don't need to read throughout the whole trip or use one toy after the other during a trip. They can have one or two items, a book and a toy. When they are bored during the trip, they look out the window and they ask you questions. I know there are so many things that our children have learned during road trips, whether short trips, long trips, reading things on the billboards, looking up and looking out. So you don't even want to engage them with so many activities to just keep them busy, busy, busy. We've talked about, if you check through our live videos, you will see where I said we should focus on keeping our children engaged and not just busy, right? So busy doesn't automatically mean that they are being productive, right? So um, the portability aspect of technology is not necessary for children because a lot of their toys, you pick one that is small, you pick a book that is small, it's portable enough for them. The visuals is another thing we normally talk about. Oh, when you're learning, some things that seem abstract, if you're able to visualize it or see it on the screen, it can help. So I think again, this is helpful for adults, right? For children, the things that they are learning, the number of things they already have to learn that they can see, are much more important than the ones you want to show them on the screen. Like I shared the example of a dog and a lion. If a child hasn't even seen a dog or touched one or touched a cat, and then we are trying to show them the bigger versions of cats like tigers and lions on the screen, it is not to their advantage, right? So those visuals helpful for adults who have already learned some of the basics, and then they now want to observe something more interesting or more, let's say, active, right? For children, even the pictures, even telling them stories about it's already helping them to visualize these things until they now finish with those basics and start moving to see a short. And most of the time, it's just short clips that they need. They don't even need to sit for 30 minutes watching how a lion is moving or how a lion is eating on the screen, if we're talking of maybe some of the most educational concepts. Now, the audio part, let's say having a book, an audio book that the child can listen to. I think that is actually fine because sometimes even some of these cartoons that we put, a child can listen to the stories. I remember us having, it was a Bible story. We had read the story of Jonah in the Bible, and our older daughter was very fascinated with it. So in the car, I just went on YouTube, selected a story of Jonah from Superbook, and we just put it, and she was so attentive. So this is someone that is even such a very visual person. She likes reading the book. So now she has read this story of Jonah, and then she's listening to it. So that is a very good use of technology that is not necessarily interfering with anything, right? But even with audio, even with music, you still need to have some times of peace and quiet. You don't have to constantly have something on. If it's not a song playing, if it's not a voice note, if it's not a podcast, everywhere there's always something going on. Then there's no time to actually sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts. By the time it's quiet, it's like, oh, it's too quiet. Someone cannot even deal with the quietness, right? So you still have to find that. That is one place I might say, okay, you can talk about balance, right? Because of the audio aspect, right? There's the benefit of helping them to train listening to their ears, but them listening, a child listening to you telling stories is even more beneficial than the device. But you can use the devices for audio because there is not much distraction because a lot of those distractions come from the visuals, the stimulations, and then trying to combine it with sounds while also focusing on learning something on a device. So I'll say that's a benefit of technology that you can kind of take advantage of. Some people have also shared how being able to read on the screen and zoom in and check for the meaning of some words is helpful. Again, I would say for adults because for children who are still learning how to read or who are even if they've started reading as we're sorry, excuse me. So as we're learning, being able to read a physical book is so much more beneficial for a child because when they are turning the pages, when they are seeing the letters being formed, it's so much. There's a lot more learning taking place than when it's being read on a screen. There's a number of research on that. The same thing with writing on a screen versus writing on paper, writing in person. One typical example that was shared is that if you're typing on a keyboard, for instance, if you're typing letter A, you're just putting your fingers, you type A. If you're typing letter L, it's on the other side. That is it. Your fingers are just moving like this. That's what happens with devices. And that is why adults can tolerate it a bit more. But even adults still need to find that balance because you're just moving, moving, moving. If you've done this for so long and you haven't even written with a pen and paper, by the time you pick up one, you're going to find yourself struggling. You might even forget how to form or how to even move your hands or your wrists. And those fine motor skills will start deteriorating or declining because you haven't, exercised it for a long time. Just having those same motions for whatever it is that you're doing is actually a disadvantage even for you as an adult. And even by the time, we start talking of aging and everything, you're not using as many skills as you should when you're just using a device versus when you're writing, when you're reading physical items. So those benefits are there. Adults, I think, are better able to manage those benefits and take advantage of it, but also still need that balance. But for your 0 to 6 year old, there's too much more they need to be doing than that, right? And that physical, again, purposeful movement, if you're able to think about what you want to say and then write it down, that is very purposeful movement, which helps with memory, helps with understanding, helps with learning. And a child needs that. Even up to grade level, grade 12, they need to be writing, right? The more we are transferring activities to devices, to technology, it's taking away that opportunity. I remember then, when you even just write out some notes, you find that you're able to recall something, maybe the color of the pen that you used to write it, or even the page, whether it was on the left side or the right side. These are little things that your brain can actually document because it is connected to what you are learning. But if everything is just on the screen, it's all the same, the same, the similar font size. It's just when you try to remember, oh, what did I read or where did I read this? You're seeing the same screen. What happened with the same screen, the same image and everything. But compared to a physical book, you might even remember, oh, how you turned the page. You might remember how you wrote this and how you wrote that. These are things that actually help memory and have been proven time and again to be really helpful. So children need it even much more in this developing stage than we can really imagine or mention. Disadvantages of technology for children, especially, is that it's abstract, and ideally, you want to build from concrete to abstract. They need to be dealing with things that are tangible. There's no benefit in just doing 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3 on the screen. You're adding apples and moving them around compared to being able to physically add. So like we have, again, this is part of the golden beads that you can use for sometimes for addition, for counting. See, even the sound that it makes is I think it's really nice. Um, so generally, devices are so stimulating, and they make the child to require so much more, will I say, external input to be able to learn compared to when a child is used to working with physical items and working on their own. So I wanted to also share some, which I've probably shared a couple of them, of course, as we were going through this video, but just to share some specific learning activities that benefit from purposeful movement. So writing is one of them. Of course, I already shared how typing on a computer, typing on a device, you're making the same hand motions for whichever letter it is. But if you're writing, if you're going to write letter A, the way your hand moves is different, and this is helping your brain, helping your engagement, and helping your memory as well, and your recall, which is very good for children. Reading and movement, being able to turn the pages, being able to look at the letters, feel the book, even sometimes perceive some books, if it's a new book and all those things. These are all things that are helping to really engage your senses. So now we're talking about engaging the senses. However, when it's on a device, it's stimulating. It's not engagement. It's like, oh, you're looking here, you're looking there, you're looking there. Concentration is just is very far away. Um, Math and movement. When we talk about math, we talked about counting, how you can count easily with physical items. We have our favorite pom-poms here. You can use this for colors. You can use, if you have the same colors, you can use it for counting. We also have physical beads. These are all things that you can use um, that are very beneficial for the child to actually learn what numbers mean, what quantities mean. Sensorial, if you have, like I shared the knobless cylinders where you have physical items. These are made of wood, and then the way they feel, being able to check the weights, having different ways of holding it because of the size compared to swipe, touch, drag and drop, regardless of what is being manipulated. For culture and science, of course, you might have a game where they'll say, oh, you're going to learn about floating and sink, and then you drag a stone into the water, it sinks, you drag this, it floats. Why it is sinking, why it is floating, the child cannot necessarily connect that. On the other hand, if it's an adult that is playing that game, maybe just for the fun of it, the adult will already know that, okay, stones are heavy, this is that, right? So that is again why sometimes when we talk about these things, adults have a little bit of an advantage, but they still need that balance. They still need that regulation to make sure that they're not also getting addicted to it, because even adults, can be addicted to the screens and the devices. But children are at a bigger disadvantage because some of the basics they need to build, if they start from abstract and then start going to concrete, it's so much more difficult than starting from concrete and going to abstract. So a simple float and sink experiment, if you have a small cup of water, it doesn't even have to be something that maybe you're going to be worried about the mess that they'll make with the water or anything. Just a small bowl, and you can give them a pom-pom, give them a bead. They put it in and they see that, oh, this one floats or this one sinks. And then they can start looking at it. Why? Is it the material? Is it because this one has an opening? Is it because this, da, 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 right? So sometimes, even without you actively trying to teach them that, oh, it's because this is lighter, this is heavier, they can begin to teach themselves. Of course, self-education is another concept which we discussed in the Montessori principles for those who are in the Montessori home education program. But these are just a few things to really share why it is very important for your child to move when they are learning, to have physical items when they are learning. And I think the last example I wanted to share is with practical life activities where executive functioning is being developed. They're able to use the sense of taste, the sense of smell, the visuals, movement, making movement versus swiping and tapping on the screen. And with fake ingredients and everything is having a similar size. The size of a tomato on the screen and size of a banana is not much different. And even if it is, it's nothing compared to holding a physical. In fact, just being able to slice bananas up for a snack is so much, 100 times more beneficial than trying to drag and drop bananas on the screen. So, really, the whole purpose of this lesson, I think, initially was really to explain what purposeful movement means, why it's important for your children to move and not sit in one place. But I also thought it would be important to at the same time explain why doing that is much better than when you now compare it with technology, with devices, with educational apps or non-educational apps or with videos. Because sometimes I feel like one of the reasons why we've struggled to really let go or let loose or kind of slow down on the whole push for digitization with children or screens is because we haven't really understood, first of all, the impact, and secondly, we haven't also understood the benefit. Because sometimes if you're focusing on, oh, negative of screen, it's like, yes, there's everything, like someone said, everything can hurt you, right? Or everything causes something. So we might as well choose that we don't care about it. But when you now know the benefits also of doing the opposite, it's not just about this is bad, but this is why this is good, this is why this is better, and this is why your children need an experience in reality and in nature as much as possible. So I hope you've been able to pick one or two things. Let me know in the comments, what your key learnings are, what you're going to do differently for your 0 to 6 year old, and even for your older children. Are you feeling left behind that, okay, maybe the digital age or the digital world they're going to not understand what to do? What exactly pushes you, for instance, to do more of technology, more of screens versus physical items? Just share your questions, your comments, and I look forward to reading them. And until next time, I'll see you all again. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.